Yes, hello everyone. I'm Stephen Stern, partner in the law firm of David Dow, Siegel & Stern. David Dow, Siegel & Stern, Long Island's elder law, special needs, and estate planning firm where the best advice leads to lasting solutions. If you have questions regarding elder law, estate planning issues, always feel free to give us a call at 631-234-3030. That's 631-234-3030, or you can get us on the web at www.daviddowlaw.com. That's www.daviddowlaw.com. And we're excited and proud to bring you Senior Counsel here on LI News Radio. And at David Dow, Siegel & Stern, in our elder law and estate planning practice, we get the same basic general questions several times a day in our office. If I get sick, how am I going to be able to make any important financial decisions for myself if I'm not able to do so? If I'm not able to communicate my wishes to a doctor or a nurse or a healthcare provider regarding my healthcare, the kinds of things that I want or don't want given a situation, how am I going to be able to communicate those wishes? Who's going to be able to do that for me, and what are some of the steps that I need to take now while I'm able to ensure that I've appointed the right people who have the proper authority? Many of our clients will ask us what they need to do in the event they have a child or a grandchild that has special needs, is a person with a disability. What are some of the things that we need to do now up front as part of the planning process to avoid a difficult situation later? And of course, there is not a day that goes by where someone will not ask us about taxes. When we mention estate planning, many times the first thing that comes to someone's mind is, what about taxes? When I pass away, what am I going to owe the government? And of course, I don't want all that much, if anything, going to the government. Certainly if it's not necessary, how am I going to be able to get the maximum amount of my estate, whether it's to a spouse or to the next generation down? And so taxes become an important part of any discussion regarding elder law and estate planning. And many of you in our community might have heard that major changes have just taken place to the New York State estate and gift tax laws. We just got a major change from our state representatives and our governor, Andrew Cuomo, up in Albany. Presently, New York is one of only 17 states that has either an estate tax or an inheritance tax. And up until the change, there were only 2 states that had a lower exemption amount. New York's estate tax exemption had been $1 million with a top tax rate of 16% since 2002. So in New York, you have to be concerned not only with a federal estate tax, but the New York State estate tax in addition to that. And that number had been pegged at a $1 million exemption amount, and that had been in place since 2002. And so New York was always considered one of those states where you don't want to die. You don't want to be a New York resident at the time of your passing, because your estate was going to be impacted not just by the federal estate tax, but by New York State's own estate tax as well. And even though New York had an estate tax exemption of $1 million, the good news on the flip side was that New York State did not have a gift tax on lifetime gifts, having repealed its gift tax back in 1999. But because this was an issue that had lingered for so long, that given the tax burdens that New York State residents face at all levels and at all times, paying an estate tax at the end of the day was an issue that was becoming really a burden, not just in reality, but from a public relations perspective as well. Too many people, too many families, successful families, was claimed anyway, were either leaving New York or considering leaving New York State so that they didn't have the additional New York State estate tax burden. And so Governor Cuomo and the New York State legislature sought to close that challenge by making New York just a little better place to pass away, at least in an estate tax context. And so back in 2013, the governor commissioned the New York State Tax Relief Commission, and he asked this commission to target tax relief proposals. Overall, it was targeted tax relief proposals valued at $2 billion over 3 years that would give a little tax relief to New York State residents and of course, also get the word out there that New York State was a little better place to do business, a little better place to work, and perhaps even a little better place to pass away. And so the overall New York tax relief efforts were targeted towards individuals, families, businesses, and estates. And so at the end of last year, the commission found that because the estate tax thresholds haven't really kept pace, and this was interesting with the rise in home values, that more and more middle-income New Yorkers find themselves subject to the estate tax. Now, of course, that's interesting because, over the past couple of years, because of the economic downturn, that so many homes in our general area, particularly on Long Island, have gone down in value. But still, over the course of many years, the thinking here was that still, even though there might have been a dip over the past few years in real estate values, that still it hasn't kept pace with the New York State estate tax. And in many areas, that makes sense because given home values, even in an area where a home value might be $350,000, $450,000, once you throw in bank accounts, stocks, bonds, IRAs, retirement assets, perhaps even the proceeds from a life insurance policy, you had many middle-class New Yorkers that were quickly approaching that $1 million threshold. Now, we might not feel like we're millionaires during our lifetime, but if you take the home value, and if you take life insurance, and if you take some of the other assets that we might have accumulated over the years, like a 401k, an IRA, many middle-class Long Islanders quickly approach that number. And so the estate tax, which was really never designed to hit the average middle-class Long Islander, now is starting to have that kind of an impact. And so among the tax commission's several recommendations, one of the recommendations was to increase the estate tax exemption and at the same time to lower the estate tax rate. And so the commission then recommended equalizing the state exemption threshold with the federal level with inflation indexing. Back in 2013, that number was $5.25 million. It's since increased to $5.34 million due to inflation. And so ultimately, New York State, year by year, was to bring its exemption amount up to match the federal amount. And that was really the idea here, so that living and dying in New York no longer placed New York residents at a disadvantage compared to the rest of the country. This attempt really was to bring us more in line with what's going on throughout the rest of the nation. The commission says that this change would not only protect small businesses and farms from going out of business because of the requirement to pay the estate tax, but it would also, quote, eliminate an incentive for successful New Yorkers to leave the state because of concerns that the low exemption level may serve as a factor in taxpayer migration from New York to other states, like a state of Florida, as an example, that don't impose an estate tax. And so in an attempt to keep the wealth here in New York, in an attempt to keep it from fleeing to other states that are considered low-tax states and other states that don't impose their own estate tax, New York State, after years of talking about it, has implemented a new law that makes substantial changes to New York State's estate tax rules. And we're going to talk about the specifics of those rules and talk about a couple of examples and how it might impact you and your family, how you can make sure that you keep more of your hard-earned assets for yourself and for the next generation down through the estate planning process. We're going to talk about that on the other side. Back in a bit. Okay, we're back here on LI News Radio. You're listening to Senior Counsel, and I'm your host, Stephen Stern, partner with the law firm of David Dow, Siegel & Stern. David Dow, Siegel & Stern, Long Island's elder law, special needs, and estate planning firm where the best advice leads to lasting solutions. If you have questions regarding elder law and estate planning issues, give us a call at 631-234-3030. That's 631-234-3030, or you can always get us on the web at www.davidowlaw.com. And we're devoting this program to talking about taxes. Tax is always an issue. It's always a question that's brought up in every client meeting that we have. Sometimes we're able to say, I'm glad you asked the question, but based on what I see here, based on your particular facts and circumstances, taxes won't be an issue. Or it can go the other way and say, because of the value of the assets, because of how you own your assets, because of the particular types of assets that you have, then you have to be concerned about an estate tax. And as we were saying last segment, in New York, many times the conversation turned not just on the federal estate tax issue, but New York State estate taxes as well. But New York State has just recently enacted a new estate tax law that will really have an impact for many middle-class Long Island families here in our area. And thankfully, that could, in many situations, be a good change. And that's so because the New York State legislature passed and Governor Cuomo signed new legislation that will implement a new plan here in New York. And although this legislation came about, it covers many different subjects, it also has significant changes to the New York State estate tax, as well as income tax treatment of certain trusts. But here in New York State, as we were saying, in an effort to make New York State just a little bit friendlier to the taxpayer, to make New York State just a little more attractive place to live, to work, to earn a living, and ultimately to die in, rather than going to another state in our nation that has a little better tax treatment, particularly on the estate tax side. New York State has passed a new law. Again, before the new law, the exemption amount was $1 million. Under the new law that became effective April 1st of 2014, New York will no longer base its estate tax the way it had before. Instead, the new law contains a new rate table and a new exemption, as well as some other changes. But beginning in April 2014 and going through to the end of March 2015, so for the first year, the New York exemption amount is no longer $1 million. It has now been increased, get those pens ready, to $2,062,500. $2,062,500. Okay, so that's a doubling here of the New York exemption amount. And then it's going up incrementally over the next couple of years until there is parity with the federal exemption amount for those who pass away on or after January 1st of 2019. So keep those pens ready. This year, the New York exemption amount is $2,062,500. Next year, from April of 2015 through the end of March of 2016, it's going to then go up again to $3,162,500. $125,000, $3,125,000. So it's going up a little over $1 million after that. The following year, from April 2016 to March of 2017, it increases a little over $1 million again to $4,187,500. So $4,187,500. And then the year after that, April of 2017 to the end of the year 2018, it is fully phased in at $5,250,000. So a little over $5 million, and that's the number where it all started at the federal amount at the time this new law was originally contemplated. And actually, as of right now, that number, that $5,250,000, which is the federal number, has actually already been increased for 2014. That number now is at $5,340,000. So let's round the numbers off and just make it simple. This year, the number in New York State has been doubled from what was a $1 million exemption to about a $2 million exemption. It's going to go up the year after that at about $3 million, then to $4 million, then to a little over $5 million. And that's the number that is ultimately going to match the federal number. And again, that was really the idea, was to bring the New York State estate tax exemption number in line with what the federal number was. Okay? And that they have accomplished, and they're going to be doing that incrementally over time. If you believe that the new laws could have an impact on your existing estate plan, the kinds of things that you need to do going forward, feel free to give us a call at David Dow, Siegel & Stern. You can always get us at 631-234-3030. That's 631-234-3030. In addition to the exemption amount, the rates have changed as well. Although the original proposed legislation would have phased down the top estate tax rate from a 16% to a 10%, ultimately the final version contains a rate table. It's a rate table that is essentially identical to the prior rates, begin at about 3% on taxable amounts not over $500,000. And the maximum rate is 16% on amounts that are over $10 million. Okay, so again, it's not just the exemption amounts that we need to be concerned with, but also the rates that apply as well. So here, let's take an example. The straightforward example is that someone's passed away and has an estate of a little over $2 million. The exemption is equal to the taxable estate, right, the overall. So there'd be no tax due on New York State. Under the prior law, there would have been a tax of about $104,000. So on an estate of about $2 million, right now there is a savings of a little over $100,000. Now, I'm sure that whether they're my clients or anybody listening today can think of a couple of things that you'd rather see about $100,000 used for than going to pay the New York State estate tax. That is what this new law has accomplished. Let's take another example. Let's say that someone passing away has a taxable estate of $2,100,000. So it's a little over the $2 million exemption. So here there's no exemption allowed, and the full estate could be subject to the New York estate tax. In this example, that would be $112,000. This is the same amount of the tax that would have been due under prior law. And why is that? Because once you go over the exemption amount, then New York State can look to that entire amount to impose its tax. And so that is something that we all have to be aware of, because even if you're over by just a little bit, the resulting tax can be quite substantial. So you can see here, just in going over the $2 million exemption amount, that could mean a significant tax pretty close to what it was prior to the change. Okay, so it's tricky. And so you really have to know how this new law applies to your specific circumstances. You can't rely just on what your neighbor tells you or how another family member's estate was treated at the time of their passing. Every single situation is different, and how the new law applies could be very different. And how you develop an estate plan is going to have to be different than the person who lives on either side of you. That is particularly important. That's a theme that we bring up here on Senior Counsel every week. But it's particularly important here that your own particular facts and circumstances will really dictate the kind of plan you need to have in place and how your specific estate will be treated. We all have different facts. We all have different circumstances. We all have different family situations. We will all want to accomplish perhaps different things and leave legacies that are important to us specifically, but you can't do any of that unless you have the appropriate plan in place. Start thinking about these things now, how a new New York State estate tax law might impact you now, and take necessary steps sooner rather than later. Be happy to assist you with that. Give us a call at David Dow, Siegel & Stern. Our telephone number again is 631-234-3030. That's 631-234-3030. I'm Stephen Stern, partner in the law firm of David Dow, Siegel & Stern, and proud to bring you Senior Counsel here on LI News Radio, and look forward to speaking with you next time.